Great. So we'll get started. In our last session, actually, so towards the end of previous session, we were discussing about what's the importance of relative pronouns, and we have discussed with what kind of relative pronouns to be used for restrictive relative clauses and non-restrictive relative clauses. So for this thing, and we have seen these two examples, how putting a comma makes difference in giving extra information about the writer, what he wants to communicate from this. So we'll continue from there. Now we'll see specifically the usage of relative pronouns, like that, who, which, whose, all those relative pronouns, how they are used in non-defining clauses. The moment I say non-defining clauses, it means non-restrictive, which means it adds non-essential information. So that information is not necessary to the sentence. It will not alter even if we remove that sentence, even if we remove that part, but still it gives some extra information. So those are called as non-essential items or non-defining clauses, or it is also called as non-restrictive clauses as well. So what we have to do is, whenever we use non-defining clauses, we have to put commas. We have to separate those non-essential items by commas, and they are separated by commas. And the most preferred out of relative pronouns like that and which, the most preferred one is which for the non-defining clauses. In case of defining clauses, that is that. So we'll see some examples here. So if you see here, relative pronoun used as a subject. So if you see, the writer who lives in this luxury mansion has just published his second novel. So the writer who lives is a verb. So who lives? The writer, which means this verb is talking about the subject, the writer. So the writer becomes the subject, and who is the relative pronoun here. So the relative pronoun which would be appropriate here in this case is the writer who lives in this luxury mansion has just published his second novel. So even if you remove the information which is in this thing, who lives in the luxury mansion, it still not alter the meaning of the sentence. So those are non-essential items. And if you see, the relative pronoun used for object, if you see the house at the end of the street, even though the house is starting at the beginning, it is not the subject, it is the object. So in our last session also, we had come up with some examples similar to this, where we had actually a problem in identifying which one is the subject and which one is the object. So I tried to check in, but I could not find additional information on this particular thing, like could subject be between the non-essential item? Because if you see, there are two commas here, and the thing which is mentioned in between these commas, which my grandfather built. Built is a verb, and verb always follows the subject. So built is who is built? Grandfather. So grandfather becomes the subject here. So I tried looking for if there are chances that subject could be between the subject could act as a non-essential item. I could not find additional information, but I'll look into it. But as far as this particular sentence is concerned, the house is the object here, and grandfather built is the subject here. So if you see, the house at the end of the street needs renovating, and it is giving extra information, the thing which is in between the comma, which my grandfather built. So because it is non-essential information, we have used which, because the house is, which is talking about the house. House is a thing, not a person. That's why we have used which. And in case if the subject, if the thing which we are referring to is a person, writer is a person, so we have used whose. So whenever we have a confusion between who or which relative pronoun to use, for people, always use who, and for things, use which. So that's the thing we have to follow in relative pronoun usage. And you see, third example, relative pronoun used as a possessive for possession. So if you see, William Kellogg, whose name has become a famous breakfast foods brand name, had some weird ideas about raising children. If you remove thing which has mentioned between the comma, you can simply say William Kellogg had some weird ideas about raising the children. And the thing which mentioned here, whose name has become a famous breakfast foods brand name, that is not talking about it is not in with the context. The thing what we want to communicate is William Kellogg had weird ideas about raising children, and between these commas are the non-essential thing, which is giving extra information about that person, but not necessarily useful or not necessarily adding some value to this what the author wants to communicate to the people. So these are put in between the commas. And whose, because there is a possession. William Kellogg, we are talking about weird ideas possessed by William Kellogg. So it is talking about possession. That's why we have to use whose. So we can't use which, or we can't use who. Whose is the appropriate name because it is talking about possession. So these are three different kinds of uses. These are the three most commonly used relative pronouns: who, which, and whose. In case of person, we have to use who, and in case of things, we have to use which, and in case of possession, we use whose. This one, we'll see some examples. First, we'll see some basic differences between defining and non-defining one. So difference between defining and non-defining classes, that depends upon the comma. Whenever we are adding extra information, just separate them with the comma, and that's how you would understand this is non-essential item. And as I have discussed this example in the previous session, they have two sons who are doctors. So what this essentially means is, in defining clauses, because there is no comma here, the meaning is that there might be more sons as well. If you see, this particular sentence can be written in this way also. If you see here, they have two sons who are doctors and one who is an architect. So in the above sentence, this thing was not added. Here it was added. So defining clauses, whenever we don't put comma, when we don't specify the things, here in this case, because there was no presence of comma, no presence of relative pronoun, it is directly talking. You can simply understand that this is a defining clause, and it even raises that there might be some other information too, which has been presented here. In case if you put they have two sons, comma, who are doctors, which means they have two sons is the statement. That's a separate statement. Who are doctors is another statement, another clause. And this means that they have only two sons and no more than two sons. That's the meaning. So that is the difference between adding a comma and adding a relative pronoun in defining and non-defining. That's how that makes a difference in whenever we are writing or communicating. So that's the importance of relative pronouns. We'll see some examples of relative pronouns. We'll do some practice here. We'll try to understand if how we could fill these things. So to start with, the first example here, the festival dash lasted all day, ended with a banquet. So what do you think would be the appropriate relative pronoun here in this case, in the first example? Which, okay. Any more answers? Okay. So what Sinha said is which would will come. So if you see the festival which lasted all day, the festival which lasted all day ended with a banquet. Actually, what you're telling is the festival ended with a banquet. So basically, you're talking about a festival, and everyone knows what kind of festival it is, because there will be usually one festival. We'll say, in this case, assuming that the context has already been built, the festival ended with the banquet. And what exactly the thing between these commas is communicating, which lasted all day? Is it really necessary to say that is which lasted all day or which lasted 2 days? Because anyway, the person already knows which kind of festival is. So which lasted all day is not necessarily an additional, an essential information. It becomes a non-essential information. So because it is a non-essential information, we use the relative pronoun which, as Sin has mentioned, and it is separated by comma. So which is the appropriate relative pronoun here in this case? If you see the second one, I'm looking for someone dash can watch my dog while I go on a vacation. What do you think would be the answer? Who? Okay. Okay. So that is true. I'm looking for someone who can watch my dog while I go on a vacation. If you see here, the whole sentence is an important one. There is nothing called as non-essential information. What the author is saying that I'm looking for someone who can watch my dog while I go on a vacation. So every bit I'm looking for someone is essential. And why is he looking to watch the dog? Because he's going on for a vacation. So everything becomes an essential information, because that's why there is no comma here. And because this is person, you're talking about I'm looking for someone. Who is talking about that someone? So it is a person. We use who, as we discussed in our previous in the previous slide. So who is the appropriate usage here? We'll go to the third one. The clubhouse in dash, the dance was held, housed about 200 people. What would be the answer here?
Where?
Which? Okay. Okay. So the correct answer is which. The clubhouse in which the dance was held housed 200 people. So in which, what this which is talking about, this is talking about clubhouse. We are talking about the clubhouse which housed 200 people. So we are talking about a thing here which becomes the appropriate usage. And because we are not talking about the location, if we are talking about the location, then where would come? Here we are not talking about location, we're talking about the clubhouse which housed the 200 people, the capacity. So which becomes appropriate usage. And if you see, this is a non-essential item. What you wanted to say is the clubhouse housed 200 people, about 200 people, in which dance was held. We don't necessarily have to say dance was held. Everyone knows clubhouse. What does the clubhouse do? It is just adding an extra essential and non-essential information. So that's why we have separated it with comma. There are two commas here in between. This is the non-essential information. Which is
if we remove in, then we can use where, right? The clubhouse where the dance was held housed about 200 people.
Actually, in the previous slide we discussed that where could not be the appropriate whenever we have preposition. Actually you're right, Sina. So whenever we have the preposition in, whatever comes after the preposition would be which. In case if we remove the in, then which might not be the best appropriate usage here. The clubhouse where the dance was held housed 200 people. Yeah, that sounds appropriate because there is in. In is a preposition. If we have a preposition, next to preposition comes is which is the preferred relative pronoun. Yeah. So in case if we remove in, because in is talking about the capacity of the clubhouse, not the location. If we remove the in, it sounds like we are talking about the location also, because it gives two context. So yeah, good one, Sina. Yeah. And we'll move to the fourth example. The baby dash nap had been interrupted, wailed loudly. So what would be the
whose?
Okay. Actually, that is correct. Whose is the correct one, because we are talking about the baby nap. Whose nap? Baby's nap. We are talking about possession. Nap is possessed by the baby in this case. So whose becomes the appropriate usage because it is talking about possession. So that is the thing, and we'll see the final one here. The police needed details dash could help identify the robber. What would be the appropriate usage here in this blank?
Which? That.
Okay.
That.
So there are two answers which I heard, which and that. So if you see, wherever we have such doubts, we have to read the we have to see what is the essential information here, what is not the essential. If everything is essential, which means it is defining clause, which means that comes. If there is some non-essential information, then which comes. We'll read this sentence and we'll see if there is any non-essential or essential information. The police needed details. Why does the police need details? To identify the robber. So it is talking, the first sentence which we are, the first part, it is talking about the police needed details, and the second part is answering why it is needed. So both of them are interlinked and both of them are actually important sentence. There is nothing called as non-essential. So that would be the appropriate usage here. So not which. In case if it is non-essential, then we'll separate it by comma and we'll put which. So here it is, everything is essential information. That's why we have to use that here. So these are the practice things, and I'll tell you about some special rules, some special uses of some rules which we have to follow while we are working on relative pronouns here. So sometimes there will be a situation like not every time we are referring to a person, because relative pronoun usually talks about subject or object. The person who came yesterday, or the bar which I went yesterday, or something like that, which we are talking. So it's basically talking about the subject or the object. But sometimes there might be chances that we are not, the relative pronoun is not just referring to the subject or object, it is referring to the whole sentence. So if you see here in this example, my friend eventually decided to get divorced, which upset me a lot. What is which talking about? What is which referring to? It is not referring to the friend. It is not referring to the divorce. It is referring to the whole sentence. My friend eventually decided to get divorced. So friend taking the divorce, this whole thing has upset me. So which is referring to the whole thing. So whenever we are referring the whole clause itself, not just the subject or object, which is the appropriate usage there. So because the relative pronouns usage here is to refer every whole clause, entire clause, so which is the appropriate usage. So in that cases we have to use which, and we'll see of whom and of which. So whenever we are talking about the persons, we use whom. Just like in the previous sentence, we said who and which. Whenever you are talking about people or this thing, we use who. Whenever you are talking about things, we talk which, we use which. So who and whom, actually there will be some that depends upon the sentence which we are talking. If we will see some examples here. I saw a lot of people at the party, some of whom seemed familiar. So and whom, of whom is referring actually to the people, because that is related to people or persons. So that's why we have used who. In the second example, if you see, he was always coming up with new ideas, most of which were absolutely impracticable. Most of which, what which is referring to? Which is referring to the ideas, not he. It is talking about which, most coming up with ideas, most of which. So which is talking about referring to the things, not the people or not the living beings. So that's why we have used which here. So if you see what exactly this sentence is saying is of whom and of which for things, for like countable nouns and non-countable nouns. If you see most, many, these are actually referred to the countable things and non-countable things. Many is actually referred to countable nouns, and some, both, all these things. So basically in such cases we have to use of whom, of which. If you are referring to people, of whom is the appropriate usage, and if you are referring to the things, we use of which is the appropriate usage. Just like previous one what we discussed, who or which, comparison between who or which. If it is people, we'll use who. If it is things, we use which. Same here in this case, whom or which. If it is people, we use whom. If it is things, we use which. So these are some rules. I'll tell about some other rules as well in continuation to that. So whenever just like if you see in the previous example, what happened is, if you see, the police needed the details that could help identify the robber. Suppose, just forget about this sentence, just read the first one. The police needed details. Is it complete? I don't think so. Still it is not. It just raised the question in people's mind who are reading it. It's still not answering why the police need details. And if you read the whole sentence, it says that could help identify the robber. So the first part of the sentence is actually raising the question. The second part is answering that question. In such a case, always what we have to do is we have to use that. So whenever the main clause poses the question and it is answered by the next succeeding clause, then that is the appropriate usage, because that is a defining clause. Both of them are interlinked. The first one is getting answered in the second one. So it is not non-essential, it is essential. So we use that. In case if we are presenting non-essential information, never use that. So that comes only when we are talking about essential information, which is very crucial to the sentence. In case if it is not crucial, it is just adding an extra information, then that would be appropriate. Sorry, then which would be appropriate. Non-essential information, which is the which is the right appropriate usage, and that is for defining clause, which is important crucial information. And as I mentioned, who or which, in case of we are referring to people, we use who. In case we are referring to things, we use which. And if we have to choose between who or that, in case if it is writing, use who, because you are referring to people. In case if you have to refer, because sometimes that is used for referring to people also. If you see the police in that example or the other one, usually in certain cases what happens is that would be used for the person as well. So but in case if you are writing, if you are communicating through written form, so who will be the appropriate one, because it gives more clarity, because that still raises a question, what that is referring to. Is it the thing or is it the person? But who gives the full clarity that you are referring to the person. So in case of choosing between who or that, if it is writing, you use who. In case of communication, because you can easily communicate the person, you both are in context, you both are in one-to-one communication, you can easily understand who that, what exactly that is referring to. But in case of written form, because the person would not be present, using the who would give more additional clarity to the person in terms of understanding it. And do not put comma before that whenever we are using that, because that is used for defining clauses where important information is present. So do not separate it by comma. There won't be any comma whenever we use that. In case of which, there would be comma. In case of that, there wouldn't be any comma. So we'll see some of the other examples also. All of this sentence are actually, I have changed and I have made some changes to them. We'll see which one is right and which one is wrong, and we'll try to understand this thing. So to start with, the first sentence here is, Shanu, who is a doctor by profession, has played the lead role in the new movie. Is this sentence grammatically correct, or does it need any changes?
It's correct.
Okay, so that is the correct one. So because we are referring to person, we have used who, and it is giving additional information. It is separated by comma. So basically what you want to communicate is Shanu has played the lead role in the movie. That's what you wanted to communicate. This giving extra information about what Shanu does. And we'll see the second one. Tina did not return the white bag that she borrowed. So is that right?
I think it's correct.
Okay. So Tina did not return the white bag. If we just stop there, Tina did not return the white bag. Which white bag? Why should she return? Because this raises some other questions also. Because does she borrowed it, or borrowed from someone, or is it her own? If it is her own, why would she not return it? So it still raises the question. The second one is answering that question. She borrowed it. So that becomes appropriate, because this whole sentence is important. Whole sentence is acting as a defining clauses here. So that is appropriate usage. So that is referring to white bag here. So see the third sentence. Spaghetti, which we eat at least twice a week, is one of my family's favorite meals. So is this fine, or do we have to make any changes here?
Sounds correct.
Okay. So actually, that is true. Spaghetti, which we eat at least twice a week. So if you see, which is referring to spaghetti, which is a thing. So that's why we have used for spaghetti, it is a thing. That's why we have used which. And because it is non-essential information, if we just remove which we eat at least twice a week, is it really necessary to mention I eat it twice a week, I eat 2, 3 or 4 times a week? How is it adding any information? How is it adding any value to the sentence? What you wanted to communicate is spaghetti is one of my family's favorite meals. That is what the thing. You are just mentioning some extra information. Usually, sometimes we do that. So because that is non-essential information, it is separated by commas, and we have used which. That's the correct thing. So these 3 are correct. So we'll move to the fourth one. The book, when it was finally written, was torn and stained. Is this fine? Actually, this is right. Yeah. So book, when it was finally written. So when is not talking about the book. When is talking about the written, the time. So we have used when, because it is non-essential information. We are just supported. We are just put the comma. Why is it non-essential? If you see, we just removed the book.
Yes.
Sorry. Okay. So the book, when it was finally written, was torn and stained. So how finally written is adding an information. If you see, the book was torn and stained, that's what you wanted to communicate. If you want to give additional important or crucial information, you won't say when it was finally written. You would say what kind of book, the book Bhagavad Gita or something, or the book some physics. Sure, you are talking about the book, you are helping the reader understand what exactly is you are communicating. But here in this case, it was when it was finally written is acting as an additional information. So because it is not essential or non-crucial thing, because that's why we have separated it with comma. When it was finally written would be the appropriate one. So when becomes the correct relative pronoun here. And we'll move to the fifth example. Where did you buy the dress which you wore last week? So is this fine?
That you wore last week without the comma.
Right, that is true. So that you wore last week. So that becomes the actual one. So where did you buy the dress that you wore last week? So basically it is giving extra information about the dress. So there might be so many dresses. Which dress are you referring to? The dress which you wore last week. So the first sentence which raised a question, the second sentence is answering that question. It is not giving extra additional information. It is just answering the initial part of the sentence. So that becomes the appropriate usage here. So that is the correct thing. And if you see the final example here in this case, the pants that I bought yesterday are already stained. So what do you think is the correct one here?
Here it's which the pants comma which I bought yesterday comma you already stained.
Okay. Any other answers?
I'm also with which.
So yeah, actually the answer for this is which only. That is what it's. That is what is the correct answer. But it also raises some doubts. The pants. If you just remove this particular sentence, if you say the pants are already stained. So that I bought yesterday, is it answering the main part? Is it answering the pants that are stained? Or is it just adding an extra information that I bought yesterday? Is it an additional information, or is it helping the person understand which pants are you referring to?
Sounds like additional information.
Because but if you see in the previous sentence, if you see where did you buy the dress that you wore last week? So last week, the thing which you bought last week is acting as an answering it is just answering the initial part, right? But here also it still answers the initial part. Because there might be so many pants. Which pant are you referring to? The one which I bought yesterday.
The previous question, it felt more like it's incomplete without the last one because it's a question. Here it's a sentence, so without that information, I feel it's still complete. The pants are already stained. Yeah, so that is why I thought maybe which is the right one.
Actually, what Sine has mentioned is right. So which is actually the right appropriate usage here in this case. So in the previous sentence, it is clearly mentioning that it is asking like a question, but here in this case, it gives a signal that it is acting as an additional information, even though we don't know which pant they are referring to, but it seems like the context has already been set up, and they are just telling that the pants are already stained. So which I bought yesterday is acting as an additional information. So not just answering the pants, or it is not answering the pants that are stained in this way. So that's why. Which would become the appropriate usage here in this case in this sentence. So here comes the end of relative pronouns topic here. So we have covered the basic rules and all the examples. So does anyone have any questions or any doubts on relative pronouns topic? In that case, we can stop the session.